Kiss Mafia, thanks for being here. Glad to see you. I'm super excited about today's episode. We're going to be talking about all things Kiss in the 80s. Now, being someone who grew up in the 80s, this was my band. This was the band. This is how I knew Kiss initially. I wasn't even born when the first two albums came out. So, this was the band I knew, right? And there's there's good, there's bad, there's all sorts of things here that we're going to get into. We're basically going to go through year by year. And, I'll say this, it wasn't the 70s anymore. Kiss's stock had dropped. They reached such crazy heights that there was really nowhere to go but down. And it went down for a little bit. And there was some rough patches in between. And, we know how it all ended and it all turned out great. But let's get right into it. So 1980 is their first of a few lineup changes. So Peter Criss is leaving the band. Although he was credited on Unmasked, which was their first album of 1980, it's largely known that he did not play on it, but he was on the cover, he got the credit. This album was very, very divisive, actually. So just coming off, if you got to remember, in 1980, 79 was Dynasty, and I Was Made for Loving You, and it was very poppy and disco-y, and a lot of the hardcore Kiss fans sort of pulled the chute, right? They were out. They were just, I'm not doing this anymore. Now, I'm a big fan of Unmasked. Actually, I really love the album cover. There's a lot of cool things going on there, and little comic book style. But some of the songs are great. There's a bunch of Ace Frehley gems on that album, actually, that I really, really like. And, one of these days I'll review it, but it's not for everybody. In fact, it didn't do very well in the States. But in 1980, Kiss, for the first time, took the tour on the road to Australia. And now that Peter Criss was gone, they hired Eric Carr. And right away, musically, Eric Carr's an upgrade. I mean, he was a fantastic drummer. Nothing against Peter Criss, but I think everyone would agree that Eric Carr was a much more bombastic drummer. He was a real rock drummer. And they went to Australia, and they were huge there. Absolutely huge. Mob scenes outside the hotels. Dynasty and Unmasked were just massive albums there. They were. They might not have been here, but they were there. And like I said, I was a fan of the album. I didn't mind it at all. And Eric Carr, sort of got a taste of what it was like to be on the road with Kiss. And, but again, the popularity had waned. Kiss had gone very poppy. The music was very pop. And a lot of, like I said, the hardcore Kiss fans didn't like that. So fast forward to 1981, they decided, well, you know what? Let's go back to our roots. Let's go back. Let's get Bob Ezrin. Let's do another album like Destroyer, right? They did Destroyer. It was such a huge hit. They hadn't worked with Bob Ezrin since then, so they decided to put together Music from the Elder, which was this concept album that, think of like The Who and Tommy or Pink Floyd and The Wall. It was sort of the sci-fi treatment that Gene had been working on in hopes that eventually maybe it would become a major motion picture as well. That did not happen. This album fell beyond short. It was just panned. If I'm going to be completely honest, Music from the Elder is the album that I go to the absolute least. Rarely do I pull out this album. It's kind of come back to life over the years, and it's sort of got a bit of a cult following. But I got to be honest, when I first heard it, I just wasn't a fan. It's so all over the place. It's just not a Kiss record. It was so different. Famously, on the A&E special, Paul and Gene are talking about how Bob Ezrin was on a lot of drugs at the time. Apparently, you can kind of see that in the results of the album. But it didn't do well at all, and it was widely panned. And now Kiss was sort of digging themselves into a bigger hole. Like I said, the hardcore fans had kind of abandoned them. They weren't the treat of the week anymore like they were in the 70s. So things are really, really going down. And, then we'll fast forward again to 82. They released Killers, which is just a sort of greatest hits album with 4 new songs, 4 decent tracks, that I liked. I'm a Legend Tonight, there was some good stuff on there. But more importantly, really, they released Creatures of the Night, which was, to me, was a return. It was just like, okay, back to the roots, hard rock, good music, straightforward, sort of kick you in the teeth kind of music. Now, Again, Peter Criss had just left. Here we are, 1982. And once again, just like Peter on Unmasked got credit for the album, he really wasn't on it. Same thing with Creatures of the Night and Ace Frehley. Ace Frehley did not play on this album, even though he was credited with it, and he's on the cover art, which again is one of my favorite cover arts for sure. I love the Blueface Kiss with Eric Singer on there. Eric Carr. And I thought it was a great album. It really was. You know, it was again, back to the roots. I Love It Loud, fantastic video. You know, that was just a great video where they just turned the teenagers into zombies and everyone's, you know, hooked on Kiss. War Machine, of course, co-written by Bryan Adams. And there's just some good songs in here. Like, I like this album. So Kiss goes on tour. We're calling it the 10th anniversary tour, Creatures of the Night, in 82, 83. And it's not well attended. Like, nobody's there. Like, literally nobody's there. You know, and they used to sell it on arenas and stadiums. It was a very tough time for the band. You know, you'll hear Gene and Paul talk about how depressing it was because they were so huge. It was a huge juggernaut. Now all of a sudden nobody wants to come and see them. Like, what's changed? This is a good album. This is good music. What's going on? And they took the act, like they did with Unmasked, to Australia. They went to Brazil in South America, where they would play their biggest concert of all time at the Maracana Stadium in Brazil. You know, over 100, I think it was reported about 137,000 people, like over 100,000 people. Still their biggest concert to this day. But it just wasn't working here. And of course, they took Vinnie Vincent with them, who played on most of Creatures of the Night, even though he was uncredited. But everybody knows that that's what it was. And, you know, they come back to the States and they decide, you know, here we are in 1983 now. We got to do something different. We got to figure something out here. It's just not taking. But to Kiss's credit, and I think this is what I like about them the most, is that when they're playing those shows and almost nobody's there, and it's sad to see, they're depressed and they're upset, they play their asses off to give everybody in that arena a good show so that they would go home and tell, hey man, you guys don't know what you missed. You missed it. Kiss is still rocking it. You guys missed out. So kudos to them for really never wavering on their performances, which I think it says a lot about them. Then they go on to 1983 to do Lick It Up. Now this is where they famously take off the makeup, right? They got to evolve. They realize it. They have 2 new band members now, right? Only 2 originals left in the band. Just things got to change. People were done with the makeup. I'm sure they were tired of the makeup at this point too, right? It's a lot. It's a lot of gear. It's a lot of stuff. So they famously unveil themselves. They make their first appearance on MTV with the Lick It Up video, where they're just sort of walking through this. Well, if you've seen the video, you know, but it's shows them walking through, and you just see their lower halves, and all of a sudden it pans up, and the first time you get to see Kiss, and it was a big moment, a little anticlimactic. Okay, well that's what they look like, and then they did a little interview afterwards. So here we are now in the non-makeup era. You know, who would have thought everything that got them to where they were is now gone, right? It's just they're not doing it anymore. They're still putting great shows together, though. That was the one thing about them, that the shows never suffered as a result. It's just, you're not seeing the makeup. It's not the original member. So it's not the same. So now you've got Vinnie Vincent, Eric Carr, Gene and Paul, right? But, of course, Vinnie Vincent didn't work out. He was difficult. He was a very difficult person to deal with. He had his demons. And he was a brilliant songwriter and brilliant musician, great guitarist. Like, just, I thought he was fantastic. But I can see how he butted heads with Gene and Paul. Like, that wasn't going to work. So they got rid of Vinny, and they moved on to Mark St. John, and they came out with, almost every year in the 80s, Kiss came out with an album, except for 1986. So here we are in 1984, and they released Animalize. with their hit song Heaven's on Fire, probably the biggest song off of that album. Great video, tons of MTV airplay, much music here in Canada. But the weirdest thing happens as they're about to go out on tour. Mark St. John, who replaced Vinnie Vincent, the new guitarist, gets this very rare condition called writer's syndrome, where his hand just kind of seizes up and locks and he can't play guitar anymore. So, you know, Kiss from being all original members through the 70s, all of a sudden in the 80s, now they're going to go on another member. And they bring in Bruce Kulick. And you know what? Bruce was great. Bruce was he was a worker, right? He was the opposite of Vinny. He showed up on time. He did what he was supposed to do. To this day, extremely respected in the KISS community. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple times. And he's just a fantastic guy. Yeah, super nice. Yeah, I got nothing bad to say. Nobody in the KISS community has anything bad to say about him. And he just rocked. And I have an affinity for KISS Animalize. I was a big fan of the I guess it wasn't a DVD back then because it was 1984. It was a cassette of, like a video cassette of KISS live in Detroit doing Animalize, like the Animalize tour. And they did all the new tracks and it was just great. It's actually a fantastic concert. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. It's on YouTube. And the energy there, because this was just now ravenous hardcore KISS fans in Detroit nonetheless. And it's just a fantastic show. It really rocks. And the songs are so fast. Eric's drumming is so fast. You've never heard the songs played like this. It's pretty awesome, actually. I really, really do like it. And one of these days I'd love to do a review of that VHS, which I still have, by the way. After that, here we are in 1984 and 1985. Gene Simmons is trying to become a movie star. He's in Runaway with Tom Selleck, which again, I have that as well. And he does that weird movie with John Stamos. He wants to go Hollywood, right? But Paul's keeping it together. Paul's still trying to keep KISS moving forward, right? So here we are in 1985 and they come out with Asylum. Sorry, I'm coming off a bad cold, but nothing's going to stop me from doing my podcast. Asylum was interesting because in terms of like KISS's look, this was the absolute worst. The absolute worst. And I was a big fan of KISS Exposed when I was young because it was just a funny video. And they played a lot of the songs off of Asylum on there, right? So everyone likes Tears Are Falling and All Night and what was the other one on there that everybody likes? Don't get me started. All Night, Secretly Cruel, King of the Mountain, no. Who Wants to Be Lonely? That's what I was thinking of. And these were good videos, and they all got pretty good. Tears Are Falling got a lot of airplay. It really did. But the costumes, they were just so over the top. They were so 80s cheese. It was just an awful era. Like Gene Simmons even says himself, he's like, I don't know if I was the fucky or the fucker or whatever. Like, it was just awful. Like, just neon. Ugh. Go take a look if you haven't seen it. And for that reason, I don't have a huge affinity for Asylum. I don't know why. I don't go to this album very often. The hits are good, but I can't get the visuals out of my head. It was just that I don't know. I thought it was great. KISS thinks they're cringe. Everyone kind of did, but it was the time. It was over the top, the hair metal and the 80s LA scene. Like, it was just an unfortunate look that didn't really stand the test of time, So that's 85. 86, again, the only year that really they don't push something out there. But then they come back in 87 with Crazy Nights. This album's huge. The song Crazy Crazy Nights, the lead track, huge in the UK for some reason. Pretty big here. Got a lot of airplay. I'm in junior high at this point, and I'm excited because this is brand new KISS, and they're playing it on the radio and on Much Music in Canada, MTV in the States. And my friends know it. It was a good song. It was a great, catchy song. It's been covered a ton of times. There's some actually very interesting covers of Crazy Crazy Nights, but it was popular. It was a good album. I mean, there was a few things on there. I had they had released a VHS too with 3 songs: Crazy Nights, Turn on the Night, and Reason to Live, which was a very well done ballad. Every teenage boy loved the Reason to Live video. There was a very famous model, I can't remember her name, but anyways, it was she played Paul's girlfriend in the video. And I remember my junior high dance, I queued up, you had to give in your cassettes because we dealt with cassettes back then, and of the songs you wanted to play, and they play them one by one, and I queued it up to Turn on the Night, and the place was rocking, everything was going good, the dance was going good. Then they put on Turn on the Night and the dance floor emptied. But I was in heaven, man. I was loving it. Turn on the Night is one of my favorite songs. There's some great 80s tunes. And, Bruce Kulick, like I said, he just shredded on guitar. His solos were great during the 80s. Eric Carr just brought a whole new energy. Like, this to me, this was the Kiss I grew up with, right? These were the four. And, they were great. And I really did enjoy these albums. They weren't all gems. There's some unfortunate songs and some of them. Like, if I go back to Animalize, Burn Bitch Burn. I mean, come on. And, of course, what do we got? We got Bang Bang You. There's some pretty cheesy stuff on there, but hey, it's what it is. It's the 80s, and the 80s were ridiculous in so many ways, for better and for worse. And then after that, 88, they released another greatest hits album, Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. Had 2 new songs. You had the sexual entendre of You Make Me Rock Hard, and of course the much more obvious and blatant, Let's Put the X in Sex. These were 2 good catchy tunes. When I'm 13 years old when this comes out, I love it. I think it's great. I think this rocks. It's new Kiss. I was excited, and the Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits album itself, though, not so great. I mean, they go to a drum machine as opposed to real drums. I don't know why you would put Eric Carr on a drum machine. And then Eric Carr doing Beth, and he's got a great voice, but there's really only one person who should sing Beth, and that's Peter Criss. And in my mind anyways, but that's the one that sounds right to me. So Smashes, Thrashes come out. I think it did okay. Nothing big. But then 89 to end out the decade, they come out with Hot in the Shade. Well, Hot in the Shade was an interesting album. Rise to It was a great video. And that sort of showed Kiss tongue-in-cheek backstage, putting the makeup on, pretending it was like the early days of Kiss and everything like that, saying, we could take the makeup off, no problem. People will still come and see us. And it was a good video. And Hide Your Heart got a ton of airplay, so that was pretty popular. And then, of course, one of the biggest hits of all time, people forget about, the casual Kiss fans, is Forever. Forever was a huge song. I love that song. It was my wedding song. Right? There's a lot of people's wedding songs, so it was a decent album. In fact, I've come to appreciate it more over the years than I did even when it first came out. One of my favorite B-sides of all time is King of Hearts. And I think that's just a great deep cut. That could have been their lead track, and I think that it would have done amazing. I love that song. Cadillac Dreams is a lot of fun. Like, there's some fun stuff on this. It was a good album for the time. Based on everything else that was coming out in 89, this was a good album. I remember buying it. I remember liking it, and the video for Forever seemed to be on all the time. And the 80s was a very up and down decade, but it felt like for a big chunk of it, Kiss was just sort of in survival mode. Like, let's just keep putting stuff out. We'll keep touring. We'll get the fan base back. And shortly after this, of course, they get into the 90s and Revenge comes out, and that's big. And then we know where it goes from there to the reunion tour. And the reunion tour and all that stuff probably wouldn't have happened if Kiss didn't keep it rocking through the 80s, man. They had to push through some tough times, but they just kept going. And they went from the small crowds, in the early 80s to the bigger crowds at the end. Like, I went to see Hot in the Shade, I went to see Revenge and some of these shows, and they were very well attended. They were great shows, and I'm glad I got to be a part of it. And Kiss was back, in my mind at that point, from where they were at the start of the 80s to the end of the 80s. I mean, it was a 180. They were back. They were in people's good graces again, and people were coming back to the old stuff. It just seemed to be a whole sort of renaissance. And then in the 90s, the Kiss conventions were going again. There was all these things that I'd love to get into another time, but they survived the 80s. They did, and it made the 90s great for them. So if they didn't just keep churning and burning and going and touring, maybe we're not even talking about them today. Maybe it could have died on the vine, but I'm glad it didn't. I enjoyed the 80s era. I'm curious what you think. What are your 80s era memories? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What are some of your favorite albums? I mean, I will eventually review a bunch of these and do more head-to-head album death matches here. But, I was an 80s kid, so 80s Kiss just made sense to me. That's what it was. So anyways, that's what happened in the 80s with Kiss. And thanks for coming again, and I hope to see you soon. All the best, everybody. Take care, Kiss Mafia.